For this video, I've been asked to talk about what information I, as a genetic counselor, might present to the parents of children that have just been diagnosed with a genetic condition. The first condition I've been asked to talk about is Klinefelter syndrome, which is sometimes called XXY syndrome. My job is not to overwhelm patients and families with genetic information. In a genetics class, you might learn about Punnett squares or how to calculate statistical probabilities. These are important concepts to know, but when I'm talking to a family, it's more important to explain the basics of genetics that they need to know in order to understand their specific disorder. While you and I might have had the opportunity to study genetics in high school, a lot of the families I speak to did not, so this is completely new territory for them. So, for Klinefelters, the most important thing to explain to them is chromosomes. I would tell them that every cell in our body contains chromosomes, which are packages of DNA. DNA is like a blueprint or instruction manual that tells our body how to develop and function. Those instructions are used to make proteins that help our body work properly. Then I would show them a photo on the left of a normal karyotype. A karyotype is usually a blood test that looks at the big picture of someone's chromosomes. Most people have 23 sets of chromosomes, so they come in pairs of 2. So the average person has 46 total chromosomes. When we are just an embryo, we get a copy of 1 chromosome from each pair from mom, and a copy of 1 chromosome from each pair from dad. So 23 from mom and 23 from dad to equal our 46. In general, not all the time, but in general, females have 2 X chromosomes and males have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. And you can see I've circled in pink and blue the typical female and male sex chromosomes. Klinefelter syndrome happens when usually a male gets 2 X chromosomes and a Y chromosome, equaling 47 total chromosomes instead of the typical 46. So, why is it important to talk about the chromosome changes in Klinefelters? Because people with Klinefelters have an extra chromosome, that means they have extra genetic instructions in their cells telling their bodies how to develop and grow. In the most severe cases, this can lead to health problems related to the genitals and a boy's ability to go through puberty. They can have trouble developing muscles, trouble with things that require coordination like walking, and trouble learning in school because of things like ADHD or autism. About half of the people diagnosed with Klinefelters have trouble with their metabolism and can develop type 2 diabetes or high blood pressure. That being said, someone with Klinefelters might have really mild signs of the disorder, like they grow taller than the rest of their family. About 1 in 650 men have Klinefelters, and often they don't even know they have it until they experience trouble having children of their own. Researchers believe that up to 75% of affected men and boys are never even diagnosed. At that point in the discussion, I could give the family more information if they're interested, but I don't want to overwhelm them with too much too fast. The other condition I've been asked to talk about is sickle cell anemia. This one is a bit different because there are multiple types of sickle cell disease. The information that I share with the family will be based on the specific type that their child has been diagnosed with, but I can give a more generic overview right now. Because there are multiple types, sickle cell disease is considered to be a group of inherited blood disorders. Our red blood cells contain a protein called hemoglobin that carries oxygen to all the different parts of our body. Healthy red blood cells are round, disc-shaped, and can travel through small blood vessels. People with sickle cell disease have abnormal or mutated hemoglobin, which changes the shape of the red blood cells to a sickle or a letter C shape. These red blood cells have a harder time carrying oxygen, and because of their shape, they can get caught in small blood vessels and even clog the blood flow. This can be really painful and can lead to health complications like infections and stroke. So if the family is seeing a genetic counselor, that means they're probably going to get some education on the genetics of sickle cell anemia. I mentioned before that every cell in our body contains chromosomes, which are made up of DNA that tells our bodies how to function. I would tell the family that DNA is made up of different genes. And when there is a change or some other abnormality in a gene, we call this a mutation, the proteins in our body, such as hemoglobin, aren't given the correct instructions, and we see symptoms of disorders. Sometimes these changes or mutations in our genes happen by random chance, and sometimes we inherit these changes from our parents. In the same way that we inherit one copy of each chromosome from mom and dad, we also inherit one copy of each gene from mom and dad, leaving us with 2 copies of every gene. I want to pause here and say that some people feel guilty when they pass down a mutation to their children, which is a completely valid feeling, but I do like to remind them that we don't get to choose which bits of genetic information we inherit from our parents, and we don't get to choose which bits of genetic information we pass down to our children. Every time we have a kid, it's a 50-50 chance or a coin flip as to which copy of each chromosome or gene gets passed down. So sickle cell disease can be caused by any number of mutations in the HBB gene, which is involved in the production of hemoglobin. The disease is inherited in what we call an autosomal recessive fashion, meaning that you would need to have inherited an HBB gene mutation from mom and one from dad in order to have sickle cell anemia. The severity of the condition depends on which exact type of mutation you inherit. But to help visualize how a family might be affected by sickle cell disease, in the picture on the right here, the parents are both carriers for HBB mutations, where the green coloring represents a mutated HBB gene and the gray coloring represents a normal HBB gene. Because there is a 50-50 chance of passing down the mutated gene, these parents combined have a 25% chance of both passing down a mutated gene, a 25% chance of both passing down a normal gene, and a 50% chance of only one parent passing down a mutated gene. As you can see here, there's a 50% chance that their child could be a carrier of sickle cell trait just like them. Sickle cell trait is a whole other discussion that I won't go into here. But if you want to learn more about sickle cell trait or what a sickle cell genetic counseling session might look like, one of the other genetic counselors from my grad school program made this informative video that you can find on YouTube. There are also great resources online by the CDC and the National Library of Medicine. I hope you enjoyed this crash course on 2 different genetic conditions that are seen by genetic counselors. I've included my email in case you have any questions about anything I covered in the presentation. Thank you so much.